Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Welcome to tonight's Policy and Scrutiny Committee for Children's Services, Education and Skills. Just a fire procedure for the council. In case of an emergency, there are no planned fire drills during this meeting. If you hear the fire alarm sound, please treat it as a real emergency. Evacuate the building via the nearest safe escape route. The nearest escape route is via the stairs. Well, actually, you're not. The nearest escape route is follow up the corridor now. We're not. I apologise for in the chambers evening. We've been bumped off to this lovely conference room. So the stairs are by the council chamber or the public gallery. Exit via the door at the back of the building, or across the inner car park, evacuation point, the pavement opposite the police station. The lift can't be used in the event of any emergency. Please do not re-enter the building until advised to do so as safely by a member of staff. Okay, we'll start off with item number 1, apologies and any change of membership. I'm aware that Councillor Spink is filling in for Councillor Medland.
Who sends his apologies?
Sends apologies. Everyone else is.
Councillor Quigley has given his resignation from committee.
Sorry,
the 9th of January.
We do have a vacancy for Councillor Quigley. Obviously, we're not going to fill that after change into committee structure in May. Do you have any? We've got this. Emily's online.
Emily's online, yeah.
We've
That's it at the moment.
not heard from Rob or Catherine.
No.
Okay, all right. Item 2, the minutes of the meeting of the 5th of December. Have we all read the minutes? Can I have a proposer or a second of the minutes, please? Have we all read the minutes? Any want to propose the minutes? Councillor Church proposed it. A second of the minutes, Councillor Downer. Those in favour of the minutes, please show of hands. You're abstaining because you weren't here, yeah? Okay. Minutes have been passed. I'll just sign and date those. Thank you. Okay, item 3, declaration of interests. Are there any declarations of interests that's on the agenda not already Okay. Obviously, now there are some different officers in the rooms, so Beth is now. Beth, want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Beth Dyer. I have been appointed as the new service manager for education, officially starting at Easter. Currently, I am the head teacher of 9 Acres Primary School.
The only outstanding school on the Isle of Wight. Congratulations.
Very much.
You'll be very welcome to the team, I'm sure. Anna.
So I'm Anna Clark and I'm a service manager for the Children's Social Care, and I'm a service manager for early help, family clubs and top life programme.
And everyone else is obviously well known to us. So welcome. Before we go on to the agenda, this of course is, barring a complete and utter disaster and need for an emergency meeting, the last meeting in the current format of this Policy and Scrutiny Committee. Unless we have to have one for the committee structure. So I think I'd just like, first of all, put on record thanks to a few people. Firstly, to Matthew and Emily, our parent governor reps, who have served us well over the last 18 months, I believe. So thank you, noted please, to Matthew and Emily. To Rob and Catherine, who always represent the diocese at these meetings, either virtually or in person. Thanks to all members that have past and present for their service on this committee. The one thing this committee hasn't been is political, which is not often say that in the council. This has been a very it's only the year I've been chairing this, a very non-political committee. I think that's appreciated. You know my view on paying politics for children. Never have done it, never will do. So thank you to all the members for your time and commitment. A huge thank you to the two people to my right, have clerked, organised, controlled these meetings so well. So thank you to both of you too. And thanks to officers who actually, and your team, you know, you've done so much in a year as well as putting a team together. Can only imagine the two jobs, you know, setting up a team from nothing and doing all the things you've achieved in the year. So thank you to, please pass our thanks to the whole team, what you've done and are still doing. So thank you.
I thank
You may, you may.
Yeah, through you. I would also like to add last night Hampshire were mentioned. I would like to put on record that in 2013, where children's services were put into special measures, Hampshire took over. And they really had to start rock bottom. And I personally don't think they have been given enough, not support, but appreciation of what they have done until you arrived. And so I would like it recorded. They did a really good job. They did pull education, especially children's services, really up to the fore. And I think they deserve that recognition. As I was chair at the time, so I was very much in the forefront. And my goodness, isn't it lovely though to have such brilliant replacements?
Thank you. No, I think that's
Thank you.
fair to note Hampshire's work on this committee as well. So thank you. Okay, item 4. You have 15 minutes allowance now for questions from members of the public. We have no written questions from members of the public, have we?
No.
So, ladies, do you have any verbal questions? You have 15 minutes for a verbal question. If you stand up, introduce yourself. An awkward angle sitting at this angle, but introduce yourself and a question, and we'll do our best to answer it for you.
My name is Sarah Butterworth. I am a parent from Oakfield Primary School, and I'd like to ask questions about the school place planning process, if that's all right.
Of course you can, yeah.
First, I'd like to ask, the council has stated that it has provided support to staff and families affected by the threat of closure. However, following the report that was released yesterday, we know that in general that support has amounted to £15 per staff member for wellbeing support. So 15 for each member of staff that has been given to the schools to support them, ones who are facing closure. I want to ask here, do you believe that that is an adequate level of support? And can you clarify how the figure of £15 per staff member affected was?
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Ashley?
I'd be pleased to start, and then I'll hand over to Naomi on the detail of the £15. Thank you very much for coming in and asking the question. So I think the papers that were published yesterday, they do indeed refer to that number, but I think it would be a misrepresentation to suggest that that is the only support that has been offered to schools. So there's been a very considerable amount of work which has happened to support staff in schools and indeed around the whole process, the communities involved. The £15 reference refers to just one element of a multifaceted approach to providing support through the process. And I'll hand over to Naomi, who can give the detail on the £15 point.
The £15 point was come up with by our HR team. We were working closely with the affected head teachers of the schools, and after lots of work with them around the support that their staff could benefit from, we didn't put any limitations on how that money could be spent. In terms of, it was generally for wellbeing, so head teachers had at their discretion the use of that £15, and we also made available our employee assistant programme for all of the schools that were affected. Bearing in mind we were not HR support for all of the schools, but we opened it up for them anyway, so they could have that. That included counselling and additional support via that programme for all of the schools that were mentioned. And moving forward, Teresa Wall is working with all of the schools should the decision be taken around the transition of pupils and working with families and communities that are affected.
So, do you wish to have a follow-up question? You're allowed a follow-up question
Yes,
if you
I-
wish, as long as it is on the same subject, obviously.
Yes, I do wish to have a follow-up question. Thank you for answering that one. I want to continue on the school place planning, and given that the council cabinet members are responsible for making the final decisions on the school closures, I want to ask a question on people's opinions on why the cabinet not why, because I know you're going to say you can't say individuals, but opinions on the fact that the cabinet members have refused to visit all 5 affected schools, even when there was an equal invitation put out to everybody to all visit all of the schools. I would be interested on the opinion on that and how people feel that the cabinet members, apart from Jonathan Bacon, I apologise, I add that in, the other cabinet members have all explicitly said they have been told they are not allowed to visit the schools, not just refusing, saying, no, thank you, we are not allowed to do it. So I'm interested in the opinions on that and how,
One question.
no, I mean, that's fine, and how
Okay.
justifying how they can claim to make an informed decision, having not actually met staff, parents, children.
So your question really is that some cabinet members haven't visited these schools that potentially are on this for closure, and second part, I suppose, the impression they were told not to do.
They have explicitly said not, have decided as a group they're not.
Okay.
It would be legally fraught potentially, so that's what we've been told, but I'm interested on more detail on that.
Okay.
I could start off, Chair. It's not that cabinet members were told not to. Legal advice was given, and it was the advice. It doesn't apply to me directly because I'm a decision maker, and as has been said, I have visited all the schools. The advice was that it was not advisable to visit the schools. Members could not do it. They were left with their own choice as to whether they should do so. Obviously, it'd be for them individually to answer that point. I think the other point, and Mr. Whitaker may wish to expound on this, is that obviously this consideration, this process is a very much what strategic planning and overview, looking at the bigger picture. And that is something that all cabinet members have been very heavily informed about through the massive paper and documentation meetings that have taken place over.
Actually, do you want to add anything to that?
I don't think there's anything I wish to add at that.
From this committee's perspective, obviously, the way the current constitution of this council works, decisions on school closures are for the cabinet. Historically, I was involved in place planning in the West White. I was part of the cabinet that made that decision. That particular time, we had the same advice. I visited all the schools. I did it regularly. To Oakfield, I've been to all the schools on the island because that was my role, as Councillor Bacon has said. But the situation rests with the cabinet. If the cabinet, we took it to full council. This committee also had a meeting in November where we discussed the procedure, the process of place planning, because we are just an advisory body to the consultation, just like you are, and we put our thoughts into consultation. So the constitution, Councillor Bacon has explained why cabinet members were legal. The advice they got from the monitoring officer.
Have details about that advice, even if it's by email after we've been told it's not been advised. Have no detail as to.
That's probably confidential between the monitoring officer and the members of the cabinet. I would imagine it's not something that can be shared. I wouldn't have thought.
I would need to check that. There have been so many Freedom of Information Act requests and so on going on at the moment that I assume that has been asked for because it's known that it's been given. I don't know what the response is. As I say, the advice was more to others than myself, but I'm sure an answer.
That looked into for you, Sarah. Yeah.
Made.
You wish to ask a question? Yeah, I thought you were. If you introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hello everyone, my name is Mrs. Jenny Hughes and I'm a parent representative of Oakfield Primary School. It's obviously on the school place planning and I'm hoping that the strategic planners might be able to help me with the question. First of all, it's given that the diocese have now sent a letter before claim to the Isle of Wight Council's legal team, notifying them of their intention to bring a judicial review if the Cabinet vote to close the 3 Church of England schools on the 6th of March, would it not be best to halt the current process and maintain control over the school place planning strategy rather than hand it over to a judicial review, which will halt it and cost the council a lot of money to fight?
So I'll link that to the members' question.
If you'd like to, Chair.
As you're aware, Councillor Lilly has raised a fairly similar worded question as part of the members' question later on. He's obviously not here this evening, so I'm happy it'll be the same answer that's given to his question and to your question.
Well, I can move on then.
Well, I'll happily read the answer out to you. I've got an answer to Councillor Lilly's question, which is very similar.
I'll wait till later. It's fine if it's very similar. Then
you won't have the opportunity members' questions for a follow-up question.
I have a follow-up question already.
You haven't answered the first one yet. We can't have a follow-up question until someone's answered the first question.
Okay, so if you need to read it out.
You want me to read the answer to
supplementary, that would be great.
Do you know if Councillor Lilly is coming this evening?
He's not. No.
Okay. In that case, then I can break protocol, can't I do this, can I?
Yeah.
Okay, I will read out Councillor Lily's exact worded question and answer it. Then you have the opportunity for a follow-up question if you're happy with that. Okay. Councillor Lilly has written to me, in the light of the recent letter of claim by one of the principal education stakeholders on the Isle of Wight, Portsmouth COV Diocese, with serious evidence claims of flaws and mistakes in the process, procedures and criteria, and serious risk of a legal challenge and damage to reputation, shouldn't the Isle of Wight Council withdraw the proposed report to Cabinet on the 6th of March, so there is time for proper mediation, scrutiny and reflection on the issues raised in the letter of claim? Does that cover your question? As
Yeah, his is a little better.
I wouldn't say that personally, but yours was better. But okay, the answer that will be given to Councillor Lilly in writing. Local authority officers have engaged with the diocese throughout the process and prior to its starting. Face-to-face meetings, online meetings, in email communication. The Diocesan Deputy Director of Education has attended all school place planning, which started in May 2024, and has had the opportunity to raise concerns or comment on agenda items. That's what Councillor Lilly will get as his response. So therefore, if you have your supplementary question.
Supplementary question is around costings. So you'll have to excuse me reading them, but I don't want to get the costings wrong. So given that it's going to cost an estimated £3,030,693 to close the 5 schools, that the estimated annual cost of maintaining the sites is £473,161, and the estimated deficit saving is £592,236, equating to an actual saving of £119,078. Is this process financially viable when it would take 25 years to break even on the expenditure to close these 5 schools versus the yearly saving? And just to talk about the 2.9 million released into education, that 2.9 million would be needed by the children that are displaced. So that money isn't free extra money. It will go straight back to the children that it's supposed to educate. It's not free money to the schools. It's already earmarked for the education of the children, just in case that was the answer.
Thank you. Did you want those numbers read out?
I think, given the detail of Ms Hughes's question,
Response.
it might be better to provide a written response to that question. I would imagine that it's also going to be asked at corporate scrutiny next Tuesday evening. So we can also use it to make sure that corporate scrutiny.
Do you believe that this is a financially viable
Hang on.
option? Yes or no?
I think the answer to your question is there's lots of numbers and figures chucked in that question. It's a good question as well. I think it's right that we get a written response to you on that. And they said there'll be other opportunities next week at the scrutiny meeting next week and cabinet meeting next week to challenge the response that you will get. There's a lot of numbers given there in a question. Ask is it viable? It's probably not a fair question to ask at this point because you ask so many questions about numbers. So.
Well, the actual saving is £119,078 a year. That's the actual saving given with the figures that you've given in the report that you released yesterday. So if it's costing over 3 million to shut 5 schools, how is that a financially viable option for the Isle of Wight Council?
So
absolutely, I'm happy to give a written response, or you can respond.
I think it'd be best if we could receive a written question and a written response, given the detail involved in the question.
Yeah.
Could I not simplify it then? Saving highlighted is £119,078. The expenditure highlighted is £3,030,000. I'd like.
I'd be really pleased to if we could receive the written question and we can provide a written response. In terms of the second simplified question, I think an additional aspect that we need to consider, which hasn't been mentioned in your question, is that the maintained primary school system on the Isle of Wight is forecast this financial year to spend about £2.5 million. £2.6 million was the number published in July, more than it receives in income. That means that the maintained primary school system on the island is losing more than £2 million this financial year. And the reason it's losing that much money is because the island primary school system is funded on a per child basis. And as the numbers of children decreases year on year, the amount of money which is provided to the island for education decreases as well. And the costs of the current primary school system are significantly in excess of the income that is provided by the Department of Education for that purpose. And that is the reason that for some years, governors and head teachers have been appealing to the council to take action to realign the number of primary school places available on the island to the numbers of children, so that the system will be able to access the resources it needs to provide improved support for children, provide a higher quality education, and improve outcomes for all children on the island. And it's not unreasonable to predict that without those changes, the island system will become increasingly overspent and indeed in debt. And if action is not taken, not only will outcomes for children be very difficult to improve, but also that debt will at some point be inherited into the council's general fund, which will have a significant impact on the council's ability to provide services, not just within children's services, for example, children's social care, but adult social care and any other services that it currently funds out of its general fund. So we predict that at the end of this financial year, the net cash balances across maintained primary schools will be about £1.4 million. If the maintained primary school system loses another £2.5 million next year, the maintained primary school system on the island will be significantly in debt. So it's very important that when we're talking about the numbers and the financial impact of making these changes, that we consider the whole education system on the island and how we return it to a system which is aligned to the numbers of children we have within the system, so that we can make it into a financially viable system so that schools can access the resources that they need to improve outcomes for children.
It's going to cost circa £1 million to close Oakville Primary
I can't allow a debate to happen this evening.
Unfortunately.
That's your question.
It's been
But
wonderful.
I think Ashley has explained the
Thank you.
principle.
Thank you.
But I would like you to submit that question in writing so you get specific answers to your specific lines of question and get that done for you before next week's meetings. If you email the question to us or straight to Ashley, you'll get a written answer before next Tuesday's scrutiny meeting. Yeah. And then obviously they've another
So
opportunity.
it won't be read out at next Tuesday's scrutiny meeting. I will get a private written.
You get a private written response.
I'm not here next Tuesday. My best friend's mum died. It's her funeral, so
Okay. Sorry about that.
I'm unable to attend.
I mean, next Tuesday's scrutiny and next Thursday cabinet, when
Yes.
the decision on this will be made, two more opportunities for consultations finished now.
Yeah.
There'll be two more opportunities to raise issues.
Yeah, we've lived and breathed it.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, may I just?
Yes, you may. Of course you can.
Thank you. I'd quite like to ask some questions as a substitute member of this committee on the topics that the member of the public has raised. Is there a appropriate time for me to ask that? And so
Members' questions at the end of the agenda. School place planning is not on the agenda for this evening. We discussed this in November. It's on the agendas for the appropriate committees for next. Now the questions, because member, thank you for coming and asking your questions. Appreciated. There will be a member's question at the end. Allow a member's question on the schools at the end, if you will.
thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Seriously, thank both of you for coming. I know it's dear to your heart, and more opportunities next week. Okay. So item 5. Item 5 is quite encouraging, actually. It's a progress update. We said a little while ago that we wanted to make sure we had no loose ends passing over to the committee, and you'll see from our progress report that we have no items that we carried forward to the committee structure, which is pleasing. So just happy to note that we've done what we said we're going to do in this current year. Okay, item 6, Children's Services Performance Budget and Transition. Papers, page 13 to 84. I assume Ashley's going to lead on with help from others.
Exactly right. Thank you very much, Chair. So I'm going to start off and then I'm going to ask Anna to talk specifically about two things. And later on in the agenda, we have some items relating to some of the other points. So, for example, special educational needs and disabilities. I'm not going to touch on too much before that features in an item later on. But I'll start. So essentially the purpose of this agenda item, we've had this agenda item on every scrutiny committee since the new arrangements came into place at the beginning of February. And essentially committees being asked to consider three things. So the first thing is around the operational financial performance of the Children's Services Directorate. The second one is around arrangements for the delivery of services previously delivered under service level agreements with Hampshire, because it's very important we were planning to make sure we had appropriate provision there. And the third one is around other key priorities. And essentially within the directorate and across the council, we talk about those three areas falling into three different areas. The first one is delivering safe and stable services, particularly at a time of very great change. The second one is around setting up new services, so replacing those ones that were delivered by service level agreements. And the third area is delivering improvement, because we know that there are a number of areas that we want to deliver improved outcomes. So I'll give you an example of one of them. Was that when we started, the Youth Justice Service was graded as a level 3 by the Youth Justice Board, and we worked to improve that. And we've now had that upgraded and by the Youth Justice Board, so that's now a level 2. So that's an example of the improvement that we have delivered. To start off with, we need to think about children, and it's true to say that the numbers of children who require additional help, support, and in some cases protection remains very high. And in some cases, the numbers of children requiring that help is actually going up. And there are examples of not just the numbers of children going up, but also the complexity of some of those needs going up. In my conversations with colleagues around the country, we know that this is a situation which is being felt elsewhere as well. It's not something that's unique to the island. So the complexity of children's needs is very high. And obviously that informs everything that we do. The second thing I wanted to say, actually, you started off, Chair, by talking to us by thanking people. I wanted to thank some people as well. So across the directorate, we've already introduced some people who haven't been to this committee before, but I want to say thank you to all of them, and also to all colleagues in the directorate who aren't here this evening, because there is a huge amount going on. Thank you for the earlier comments about what's been achieved over the past 12 months. We are into our second year now under the new arrangements. But not just to say thank you to them, because there's a huge amount of work that's going on across the whole council that is supporting the work that we're doing. So if we're thinking about the support we receive from our human resources colleagues, from our information technology colleagues, from our legal colleagues, it's a significant council effort. And I'd say also, and I'll give some examples of this in a bit, it extends much wider than just the council. So there's a lot of partnership work going on with colleagues in other organisations across the island community, whether they be statutory organisations like the National Health Service or the police, or voluntary sector organisations, or working with early years providers, schools, colleges, parents and carers, and of course children and young people themselves. So a big thank you to everyone on the island community involved in this, because a lot of children's services work involves working in partnership and collaboration with people outside children's services. I wanted to highlight some things I think that are going well, some areas of strength we have that we should be proud to record as having been achieved. So the first thing I want to talk about is the education strategy. So last summer we published a draft education strategy. It's a strategy through till 2030. The final version will be considered by Cabinet in April, and it outlines the strategy which has been produced by people across the system on the island about how we will improve outcomes for all children on the island through until 2030. So it's a 6-year strategy. The second thing I want to mention is the Ofsted focused visit, where they came to us in October and November, and they had a particular look at children who were in need of help and protection. I did mention this at the meeting in December, but at that point, or when the papers were published, the letter had not been published, so I couldn't say too much about it. But I'm going to, when I've finished, I'll hand over to Anna and she'll give you a bit more detail about what Ofsted said. But in summary, we are pleased with what they said. We have a long way to go, but we were very pleased to have that external recognition of the improvement that we have delivered. We have made good improvement, good progress with setting up in-house provision for some of the services were previously delivered by Hampshire. So 2 examples. So the first example in terms of education. So previously the school improvement team was delivered by Hampshire. We are in the process of setting up our own in-house provision, and we've got Beth Dyer here this evening with us, and Sam Silito is another Island head teacher, a very well respected head teacher who will also be joining the council in April, and we're delighted to have them as part of the team, working with colleagues across the council and the Island community to improve outcomes for all children. Another example I will give is the multi-agency safeguarding hub. The multi-agency safeguarding hub is the place where people go if they have concern about a child. And when the relationship with Hampshire, or the partnership with Hampshire, finished at the end of January 2024, there wasn't enough time to set up one of those. So Hampshire agreed to carry on doing it until the end of March. We decided in the summer that it was in the best interests of Island children and families to set up an on-island MASH, and we started doing that in September. And I'm really pleased to say that the MASH went live on Monday of this week. It is up and running. It works. And we are running a dual model through until the end of March, where Hampshire are also live as well. So we have a bit of contingency there, so we can check that everything's working. And they will cease to operate at the end of March, and then we will be flying solo from the beginning of April. So it's early days with it. We are really pleased to have got that up and running and delivered it at the beginning of this week. And we're going to watch closely about how we can use that local provision to improve outcomes for Island children and families. And I want to say this is a really good example of, this isn't just about children's services, it's about how we work with the rest of the council to deliver it, because it's been a huge IT response. We've got police IT in there, we've got National Health Service IT in there, and it's a multi-agency approach to it. And so it's external partners as well, because it's police and it's colleagues from the National Health Service. So it's a real good example of how we need to work in collaboration with others to improve outcomes. We've made some good progress with improving the infrastructure. And actually Anna's been really involved in this and continues to be, because we're replacing a lot of the IT infrastructure that supports the work we do around children's social care. That's ongoing, but actually a piece that has been implemented now is a new case management system for the Youth Justice Service. And that was delivered ahead of schedule, within budget, and it will allow us to understand the needs of our children, to share information, to analyse information, and make more informed interventions to support those young people who are involved in the criminal justice system. And the fifth thing I wanted to mention is that we're making progress with our approach as an island community to what we call corporate parenting. This is the support that we give the children that we care for. We have about 280 children that we care for, but also those children who are care experienced. And in March, there will be a motion at full council where full council will be asked to consider treating care experience in the same way that we treat the other protected characteristics mentioned within the Equalities Act. And that's in recognition of our commitment to going the extra mile to support those children who have been in the care of the local authority and who are care experienced, to help them on their pathway into adulthood, to make sure that they get the support they need around entering employment, about having somewhere to live, and then including within the community. So I wanted to mention that here because that'll be coming up on all your radar screens before too long. 3 areas I wanted to highlight which are proving very challenging. It's important that you're aware of. They're mentioned in the paper along with some others as well. The first one is the needs of children. And an area where we're seeing not just a significant increase in the number of children, but also severity, is that around special educational needs. And there's some data in the paper you'll see there about the numbers of requests which the local authority receives for assessments relating to education, health and care which may then result in the child having an education healthcare plan in place in order for their needs to be met. Now, we know that if you look at the numbers of education and healthcare plans on the island as a proportion of the total child population, we have the highest percentage in the whole country. And there's lots of factors around that. But what we're seeing is that the rate of requests, the numbers of requests continues to be very, very high. And what that does is it puts a lot of pressure on the services we have to do those assessments, because those assessments need an assessment by an educational psychologist. They may well need a speech and language therapist to do an assessment, and there's a statutory team who has to oversee that process. And that's absolutely the right thing to do in terms of understanding and meeting the needs of those children. It does mean that there's a very significant workload going through those teams. And we're working to make sure that those colleagues are supported and that we have the appropriate services in place to support them. The second thing is access to resources. And I don't just mean money in terms of resources. There are certain specialisms that are very difficult to access because, again, nationally, as needs of children go up, the numbers of professionals, practitioners with those specialist skills doesn't necessarily go up in line with that. Where some of these specialist services are essentially a free market. So those of you who have an elementary understanding of free market economics will know that if you have an increase in demand and supply doesn't increase in proportion, you have an increase in price. And of course, that puts pressure on budgets as well. And you'll see in the report that we do have significant challenges around budget, not just actually in special educational needs and disabilities, but also within the sphere of children's social care. And the third one I want to say, is an example of a particular profession there, which is about educational psychology. And it links also to setting up services which were previously delivered by Hampshire. It's proved very, very difficult to recruit educational psychologists to come and work on the island. And so what we have done as an interim measure, when I say interim, we don't know how long this will need to go on for, but we've had to go to an external company and commission them to complete our educational psychology assessments, which are required as part of the education healthcare needs assessment process, and also to be active in the other work that we need to do around educational psychology. So that is an area where it's been very difficult to replace the service level agreement that was previously being delivered by Hampshire. That's all I wanted to say. I wanted to hand over to Anna to give you a bit more detail about what Ofsted said. We really welcome external scrutiny because it informs our improvement plans and it helps us work to improve outcomes for children. So we really welcome that. We think we'll have another Ofsted focus visit on something else later this calendar year, which will also be welcomed and used to inform what we do next. But also it's important that as a committee, you understand that everything we have to do, or everything we're doing as we're planning for the future, it has to be done within a changing national policy context. And there's a lot of stuff happening at a national policy level, which Anna will also, just for a few minutes, give you a little bit of an insight into. Thank you.
Actually. So as set out, we had an Ofsted focus visit that focused on our area of children who were children in need and children who were requiring child protection services. And that was in November. Just to provide a context, we provided the normal level of information as if we were having a full inspection. And they spent a week of time going through that information, and then they came and spent 2 days with us observing practice and looking at where we were at in terms of our improvement journey. As you've seen within what they set out, we actually had some really positive feedback that they had reflected that we understood ourselves, our self-assessment was accurate, and that we had a clear understanding of where we needed to improve. They did set out that there continues to be work that needed to improve services around the quality of practice within children's social work, most notably around the quality and consistency of plans, the impact of supervision and audit activity. However, positively, we had already identified those areas and we already had improvement leads in place at this time. I think it's important that we recognise that that was a really positive reflection that they understood that we were taking active steps to address those areas going forward. What they also set out to us is that actually most children are receiving the help that they need, and that they are receiving better help and are being supported to be safe. So that's the main thing that we wanted to ensure that we are able to achieve and deliver for children. Many weaknesses that have been identified in our full inspection, they were able to reassure us, as we hoped they would, and we had continued to monitor quite robustly to ensure that we were able to see that progress. But they provided that reassurance that actually we were making the improvements within the area to us. They were very positive and complimentary over our children with disability team and the support and the work that is taking place there. And they were able to reassure us and provide oversight that actually where it was identified as a specific area of support for us, that we had made progress there. They also outlined to us that in terms of our work with children who may be at risk of entering proceedings, that we would call the public or outline, that we had made improvements there, and we had taken on board what they had outlined to us. We had brought them in. They also set out to us that actually our vision of creating change together within the workforce and bringing people collaboratively alongside us and ensuring that we were all on that journey together was working. They were highly complimentary about our methodology of working with our workforce, and they also set out to us that actually staff were very complimentary about working for the Isle of Wight Council and for working for children's social care. So we were really reassured that actually that was having the impact that we wanted to see. In terms of what we also went through at that time, as Ashley outlined, we'd already got an expert on board to look at our MASH model and ensuring that we were implementing that effectively. And they were again reassured about our work around that area. But we've also got the sufficiency lead, looking at homes for children, showing that we have the right plans in place and a strategic approach to that. That work is also underway, and I believe that work will be coming forward in the coming months as well. So the corporate parenting board, as we briefly touched on, that was an area of specific improvement work for us in our full inspection. Again, that has improved, and we've got under new terms of reference. There's been a lot of work around that area, and we've seen some positive progress, and they were able to understand and see that we were making those clear strides forward. So we also, as we've touched on, had an area of improvement for us that's set out in our full inspection around our case management systems. They'd identified that actually the system that we had was not supporting social work practice. And again, we've made significant steps forward as we've outlined. We've implemented a system within the Youth Justice Service. We are underway in implementing a system within early help, and we are underway in implementing a system within the children's social care workforce. And we're on track to deliver that. It's July time that we will be delivering that work. And then just coming back in terms of the work that we were doing around quality assurance framework, that work has progressed and we've implemented new tools, and that draft work is currently taking place, ready to be fully implemented. So we've made further strides since we were inspected. Bit that I just also wanted to touch on with everyone is in respect of the children's social care reforms and that national change, really. So not only we had work that we've been doing to ensure that we've been able to fulfill the areas of improvement that we'd identified and that Ofsted had identified with us, we've also been taking the work forward in terms of service level agreements that were in place and ensuring that work transitions safely back to the Isle of Wight and is making good progress. But we have further areas where nationally there's a changing context that we will keep on going forward. So the children's social care reforms that are referred to within the paper, that they came about following the independent care review and the national panel review. And this paper was issued in terms of government policy in November 2024, where they brought out keeping children safe and helping families thrive. In terms of what they're looking to implement, they're focusing on work with whole families, so more children and young people thrive within their own family. There's a prioritisation of kinship care for children who cannot live with their parents. There's support for children and care leave and happy lives and live in high quality care provisions. They are taking action to end excessive profit making and working to empower professionals to work within it. So really focusing on work efficiency. What has then come out more recently is the Families First part. This will be rolling out from April 2025. We're waiting the full guidance for that, but we have been given some highlighted guidance over what we need to focus on in this transformational year that's coming forward. In terms of the Family First Partnership Programme, the priorities are family help, where we are being asked to establish a seamless transition for families who are open to targeted early help support, being able to go through to child in need support with an emphasis on whole family working. So a merging of those two services in essence. We will need to establish a family help lead practitioner role, establish community-based multidisciplinary team that are able to offer help to families, reform practice at our front door to promote access to and engagement with services, and establish a single family help assessment plan. So that's one part of the whole raft of reforms. We also then have within child protection the requirement to establish multi-agency child protection teams, which will bring together expertise across all agencies to deliver decisive intervention, to establish lead child protection practitioners and embed that throughout our whole workforce, parent representation as well. We have briefing around family networks, where we have to build a family first culture and open up family group decision making and embed that throughout our services. And then we also have multi-agency safeguarding arrangements, which set out what we need to do around ensuring that our work with safeguarding partners across the local authority continue to deliver what we need to. So I've given quite a highlight brief over what is coming. In terms of our next steps, we are going to be meeting with the Department for Education. We are going to be looking at how we get ourselves into the position of being able to deliver on this. And that's every local authority nationally has been asked to do this, where we assess our readiness for reform and we start to engage with our local partners and agencies around how we will deliver these reforms alongside working with the Department for Education. So as I stated, the year 2025 to 2026, they have outlined that that is a year of transformation nationally for children's social care. And we have very clear mandate to deliver co-designed activities to implement this. But I'm happy to take any questions if any.
Ashley, first of all, thank you for your presentation. How long have you been here?
13 years.
How long have you been in role?
So I've been within this role for around about 10 months.
Okay, it's a high level of knowledge. Thank you for your detailed presentation, much appreciated. A lot of knowledge and a lot of information in there, much appreciated. Members' questions, we must have loads. Who would like to kick off? Councillor Downer.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Just like to ask about the MASH. Now, are you going to have a sufficient number of social workers to actually to man it? And also, with the people that we're going to see, will there be enough people to form stable relationships with those people that they're trying to help? Because it's no good sending one and then another who doesn't know hardly anything about the case.
So our multi-agency safeguarding hub, they triage what is coming to children's social care in essence. So if a visit is required to a family, there's no change there. That goes through to our children's safeguarding, our support and protection teams. So they will continue to receive the service where they will get a consistent social worker who will be seeing them. The multi-agency safeguarding hub does have social workers within that. As I say, this week, what we've seen is that they've managed very well in terms of what has come in. We have the backup plan in place if there are any difficulties, but the current indications are that that's working very well in terms of its setup, and we've evaluated how many workers we needed, and we've recruited to those posts before we went live to give that assurance that we would be able to fulfill the demand that we have.
Mr. Lever.
Thank you, Chair. Bear with me on this one. I'm just wondering about with bodies like Ofsted, so the reports that they give and the advice that they give, and then we obviously monitor ourselves on the progress against that. Is there a feedback loop back into bodies like Ofsted where we say, okay, yes, we're making good progress on this thing you've asked us to do, but actually is that thing you've asked us to do having the outcomes we want it to do, and therefore you're giving the right advice? Does that feed back into Ofsted? The reason I ask is because my opinion of Ofsted isn't very high, so I just want to make sure that.
Well, do you want to answer that, Anna?
I can do.
Yeah,
So we have what's called an annual conversation with Ofsted, and it is part of what we do around our self-assessment. So we continually evaluate our progress, and we do focus on what's the impact of the work that we're doing, and what are the outcomes, in essence, what are we achieving for children. We do that throughout the whole system, and then we put that together. We use that to inform our plans, but we also have what's called an annual conversation where we present that information to Ofsted, and they robustly ask us some questions around that to ensure that actually they are satisfied that we are on the journey that we need to be. It does provide an opportunity where we might be able to say, if we've had some advice given to us that is non-statutory, for instance, where we say, well, actually, we've done this and we didn't feel that that was happening, but this is why, and this is why we're now doing this. And it really is about those evidence-based decisions that we're making and being just those to them, and also ensure that we're very clear on our priorities and how we're going to implement.
Thank you.
So can I just add something? I mean, I think for us, it's really important to welcome external scrutiny.
Yes.
We don't come to work because of Ofsted. We come to work because of the children. And actually, whether it's Ofsted or whether it's we contact the local government association and we say, come in and challenge us on what we do, and give us recommendations about how we can do better. It's part of that external scrutiny and that external independent assessment of what we're doing. So we welcome that. And I don't know what your experiences are based on, possibly schools, for example. I mean, people have got different experiences of it. But I look at it in that context of just getting external scrutiny. So, for example, in the Youth Justice Board, we have the Youth Justice Board. They come to our meetings and they scrutinise what we do all the time, and they give us feedback. So we look at it in that context.
Just to add back, my questioning was not of the team whatsoever. I fully appreciate with the job we do in-house. It was more a question of making sure that the regulatory bodies are also taking on board advice the other way around as well.
So sorry, but so I think they are listening a lot more than they used to. So, for example, when they were doing, you might have read about or heard about this thing they were doing called Big Listen or Big Conversation?
Yeah.
Big Listen. And they said, we're going to roll this out across the southeast. And they didn't originally have, they weren't originally going to come to the island and do it. So Naomi was onto them. Actually, we'd really appreciate you understanding that the island needs some bespoke opportunity to feed back to this. And they came over and they met with the head teachers, and they're definitely listening. I mean, obviously there was some really tragic events linked to Ofsted, and there's been a change of leadership there. And I think as an organisation, they are becoming a lot more open to listening to feedback and responding to it. And I've certainly felt that and seen it. Yeah.
Can I have one other point there? We work really closely with Ofsted, and actually at the moment, following on from the Big Listen, there is currently a consultation on the new framework that's going to come in around report cards. You might have heard about them for September, and they're going to trial that. So they asked us whether we had any schools that would be willing to be part of that trial, and we have, and we've got 2 schools that are going to be part of that trial. And obviously those heads are excited but nervous too. So we're really pleased that Ofsted are actually coming onto the island and working with us in a really proactive way, so we can help shape how the inspectorate do their work.
Thank you.
Another question, Councillor?
Is that okay?
Yeah, of course you can.
Well, thank you,
I'll
yeah.
go last with my list.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I'd just like to follow on from Councillor Lever, if I may, and then ask my other bit of question. Ofsted, a complete degree of arrogance at the top before Ruth Perry tragically died. And that is very, very sad. Our eldest daughter is a teacher, perhaps I shouldn't say that, but she's experienced different Ofsteds, and there no inspector is never the same. They're all different, and they all focus on different things, and some don't even relate to the children, which is pretty sad. And you know, I came across an Ofsted inspector at Ventnor Middle School years and years ago, and completely arrogant, and that is really bad. I don't know whether they've been held to account for that, but it's not good. It doesn't project a good relationship. The other thing I would like to ask is about early picking up on autism and ADHD and things like that. Now, people in preschools who are actually doing the work, they're the people that are going to pick up on it early. So could you tell me why it takes so long before diagnosis? Because they're the people on the coalface that they're picking it up and they know the signs. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
You're welcome.
So on the Ofsted question, I have regular meetings with Ofsted. I meet them on a very regular basis, and I would say that over the time that I've worked with them, if I've had any concerns around an inspector or an inspection, they have listened to us, and we are an integral part of the process. So when a school gets the phone call, we're contacted. We are a part of the timetable, so we meet with the inspectors, speak to them about the school and the progress the school is making in any areas that we need to develop on. We talk about the support that we're putting in place, how we work with the head teacher, and then we attend the feedback at the end. Now, if there is a school that needs additional support to that, we provide that during the inspection too. When I've experienced an inspection that has not gone the way that the head or the governing body would like, we've intervened, and that has resulted in a re-inspection. So Ofsted do listen. I've worked very positively with them and had very positive relations with them. Different areas are different. It depends on the relationship you build with them. And I really pride myself in working with Ofsted and the DfE very closely, because they're key players for us, and we need them to help us on the island because we've got so much to do. So we know that we've got a lot of things we need to work on, but it's about working in partnership. In terms of your second point around earlies, and I won't, I'm sure Teresa will be able to talk about that too. As children develop different things, they get exposed to different things too. And also when they're in a smaller environment, a lot of the time their needs can be met. And as they go into a bigger environment, some of those needs that were met very well can be exposed more. And obviously as children develop, our developments actually as they go through, especially into adolescence, some of the needs that have not been met previously or were not exposed to can get exposed to. So for example, we often see children that may behave in a way that you might class as naughty, and actually it's probably an unmet need around speech and communication. And actually it could be an unmet need around dyslexia or something like that. So early intervention is crucial. Teresa oversees the two early years team, the SEN early years team, and our quality team, and we do an awful lot of work across all of our settings and have good relationships with them in terms of that. Numbers, I'm going to talk about SEND in a minute anyway, but numbers of SEND have increased across the board, and it's really crucial that we get the right support in early enough.
Also, that under item 9, that will come out, Teresa. On your item 9, you'll cover that bit in your report, won't you?
Yeah.
Can I just add something just really quickly to that, Councillor Dana? Thanks for the question. It's an example also about where we need to work in partnership, because actually the organisation that's responsible for paying for and providing, not necessarily provide, but paying for and making sure that it's delivered is the National Health Service. And so in terms of assessments around neurodiversity, autism, for example, they are the organisation who leads on that to make sure that we have sufficient provision on the island. And that's why, so to do with special educational needs and disabilities improvement, we have what we call the SEND Partnership Board, which I co-chair with a colleague from the Integrated Care Board. And that's because in terms of statutory duties with regard to SEND, the council and the NHS lead that together. And it's really important people recognise that, because sometimes people think the council are responsible for everything, and actually they're not. The NHS is also responsible. So in terms of those diagnoses, the model at the moment is that, and part of it's because there's a long waiting list, is to see about online assessments. And online assessments have increased a lot because they can be delivered by people from all across the country, can't they? But what's really important, obviously, and this was a question that was asked actually by one of the charities that sits on the SEND Partnership Board, and they come along to represent that community and those families that they support. And they asked the NHS the question, about, are we confident that when a child needs an assessment and they're offered an online assessment and that's not appropriate for them, that we have opportunity to do that face-to-face assessment as well. And the NHS, were responded to say that they were confident that was the case. But that's the sort of thing we need to make sure that we do have local provision, but it's not just the council that needs to be involved in that. The other thing about it is, given that the waiting lists are so long, what's important is that we need to get support to children and families prior to a diagnosis. Why would you have to wait for a diagnosis to get support? Because often the needs of the children are there. So if you don't put support in then, and you have to wait 2 years for an assessment, your needs have escalated a lot. That's not good for anybody, particularly the child. So we need to get to a mindset where you don't need a diagnosis to get support. And if we do that, that will align with our vision of having a system which is much more focused on early intervention and prevention, and doesn't wait until needs have got bigger and you're in the statutory end of the system. That's what the shift that we need to do to make from the statutory end of the system to early intervention and prevention before needs have escalated. That's the best thing for children. It's the best thing for resources.
Well, thank you, Ashley, and thank you, Naomi, for the comprehensive answers. And with the Ofsted thing, it's good that it's going the right way now. And there's always two sides to everything. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Spink.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a question, please, about children SEND as children, as it were. And it relates partly, or indeed entirely, really, to school closures. Some of these schools, if they are to close, have a high proportion of SEND pupils. I mean, I don't want to name individual schools, but I know of two. One has 48, I think I'm right in saying, % of SEND pupils, and another has 52%. And I'm sure the others have some. I don't know their percentages. Those children, if their schools do close, are going to need extra support, particularly, I would have thought, over the initial period. I mean, changing school for children can be traumatic anyway, let alone for SEND children. Is there anything in place for that? And is the team sort of looking at that to make provision and extra support for the SEND children who are going to have to change school?
Can I start? And I'll hand over some other experts on it. So the first point around data. So I think we need to be careful with the data. So the data around special education needs is made up of two things. The first one is children who have an education and healthcare plan. The second one is children who are classified as being on SEN support. So they have an identified special educational need, but the view of the school is that their needs can be met without an education and healthcare plan. There is a great deal of variation between schools, not just on the island, but also across the country, about the methodologies schools use to put someone onto that SEN support register or not to put them on that SEN register. So on the island, if you look at the percentage of children in a school who are on SEN support, it varies from more than 50% of all children to single figures.
Sure.
Okay. That may or may not be a true reflection of the actual needs of children. That is the case on the island. That is the case around the country. The second thing I'd say about it in terms of the money is that all schools within their budgets have a line called notional SEN. That money is specifically for schools to spend on supporting children who have SEND. Some of it goes towards children who have an education and healthcare plan, and some of it goes towards children on SEN support. The combined value of notional SEN budgets across all island schools is more than £15 million. If we did an audit of island schools on how they were spending that £15 million, I would be very interested to know how much of it is being spent on SEN and how much of it is being spent on balancing the budgets across the schools who are loss-making year on year. Some schools are losing more than £100,000 a year. I would be really interested to know whether the notional SEN budget that school has is being spent to meet the needs of those children, or whether it's been spent on trying to balance the budget of the school.
I think we'd probably all like to know that.
So that's the point I would make about, so the point about realigning the number of primary school places for the primary school estate is about making these schools financially viable so that the resources that they have can be spent on the things they are meant to be being spent on. So that's the point about money. The point about transition, I will stop talking and hand over to Naomi and Teresa.
May I just ask you a follow-up to that? I wasn't really intending my question to go to the financial aspect of it or the justification for school closures. The point I was making was the SEND children who will be changing school, and certainly those with care plans or the, I'm not sure, I'm a newcomer to this committee, if that's the correct expression, the care plan or the, yeah. The children who've got the care plans in those schools, I was really asking, will they be identified and will they get extra support to help them? I don't mean financial support, although it may come at a cost, but I don't mean financial support. Will they get extra care, for want of a better expression, over their period of time that they're changing and getting used to a new school? That's what I wanted to know.
So
Thank you.
we actually asked Teresa to take on that role. So Teresa's actually been seconded into a role as transition manager and has created a document which is within the papers. And actually, Teresa, I won't take you.
So some of the work that we've already done, obviously in terms of schools closures, and this work in case, because it'd be too late to leave it until that date going forward. So we're already working on this already. And in terms of what we've already done is we've mapped all of the children across the island. So we know all those children that have EHCPs, that are SEND support. We know if they're children in care. We know if they're open to social services. So we've already mapped all of those children and we know what schools they're already in. If the schools closures do go through, then there'll be additional meetings with those head teachers to ask the head teachers who are those vulnerable families as well, because there'll be other families that they will know that are vulnerable.
Sure.
So we will also then have those discussions about those additional families that we may not have on our system, but the head teacher feels they are also vulnerable for whatever reason. They're vulnerable.
Excellent.
So as part of the report that's gone in that was published yesterday, there was, may or may not have seen, there's a timeline that has been proposed for the support that will be put in place for these children. And the LA will direct some of this support, or they will work with it, they will suggest, or they will work alongside the schools to make sure. So for example, when you're talking about SEND children, we will ensure that if it is required, because it won't be required for all, but if it is required and they need extra visits, they need extra support, that support will be there. I've worked with all of the teams across children's services, and all of the teams have come together to say what they can offer in addition to what they already offer. So what additional things can they offer if the proposals go through? So we've got that all in place, should it happen, and then we'll be ready to go if it goes through.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to hear that. And it wasn't, my question wasn't intended to be a criticism. It was simply a clarification.
A very sensible question to ask.
Thank you. I've got just one other question, if that's all right.
Right, yes.
And that really relates to, it's somewhat ironic to some extent that you've been working, and I mean this sincerely, you've been working hard to set up a system in the absence of Hampshire that we're now considering as an island, and in fact we're on the fast track for a devolution scheme with Hampshire. Now, as far as your role is concerned, is that something that this team welcomes or is concerned about, or hasn't had a chance yet because it's very new to think about it?
I think that, thank you for the question. That's interesting. Obviously. I think that we welcome it because we are interested in the opportunities around what the new structure might bring. And you know, we don't know what will hold, but if it happens that there is additional money that comes locally, you know, that there may be opportunities for that. It's really not something which we are particularly focused on at the moment, because you know, who really knows what happens. We've got plenty of other things to be doing locally, and of course the you know, what that would actually involve is so unknown.
Thank you.
Councillor Hendry.
Probably a not so interesting question. You mentioned IT and systems during the talk. You're replacing 3 IT systems. One has been done and on budget. Are the other 2 set to be on budget? The other question is, are they bespoke systems to us? This off the shelf. We just need some customizations. That's been.
I'll hand over to my technical expert who's here tonight, Anna.
Okay, so the early help system is it's actually a data warehouse. We are working with them because there are bespoke aspects of that. There are likely to be other things that we will need to do to that system in light of the reforms that I've outlined that the government wants us to deliver, but we've already started to budgetary put some money aside to be able to deliver on that. They are on budget. You'll be pleased to hear, and that one. And then for the children's case management system, which is a much larger project because it goes across the whole of statutory children's social care. We have moved the timeline for that by 1 month to enable us to fully prepare to be able to deliver our user acceptance testing, which is our opportunity to ensure that it meets all our needs. We have, I would say, a hybrid version. There are aspects where it is off the shelf, and there are aspects where we have had to make bespoke amendments to that system in essence to meet our needs. It certainly isn't unusual. Every authority to some degree has to ensure that they have a system that's fit for purpose, and whatever system is purchased by any local authority usually leads to an element of having to tweak it a little bit to make sure that it works the way that you want it to. It is currently on budget, and I'm hoping it stays that way. So yeah, if you need more specific details, that's fine, but we aren't doing anything unusual in the context of delivering that system. We're in touch. We have an expert team that are working on it. They've worked with the local authorities, and we're in touch with the local authorities as well in terms of getting their feedback over how that works. And then the likelihood is with that system that we will still continue to need to make some tweaks and amendments to it when it does go live, but again, that isn't anything that's unusual, and we're currently working at putting our business as usual plans in place for that.
Can I add? If you read the Ofsted report from 2018, you will read that Ofsted were commenting about the need for a new case management system in 2018. So I'm really grateful that Anna's now grasped this, and we're on track to get it live this summer, because it'll be great to bring that for financials.
Scribble out one of my notes that actually cover one of my points. I've got a few observations listening to and a few questions really. Ofsted, 8 years ago, I was a simple, humble bank manager and a long-standing school governor. We thought Ofsted were out to get you, just like bank inspectors were, and you know, they didn't listen to a word you said. But when I made it my goal to visit all primary schools in my term as cabinet member, and I had a set template I went with, and I called it words and figures of banking terms. What I read on the Ofsted report was that what I saw in the school. I have to say, in all the primaries I visited, there's only 2 where I thought that's not right. One I thought, how on earth did they get that higher rating? The one I thought they didn't deserve to get the RO rating they had. So only of the 40 primary schools, only 2 Ofsteds I thought that's not what I saw in my morning's visit. And and then obviously being involved in the 2018 Ofsted report for children's services, I sat down with officers and we thought, well, where are we going to be picked up on? Where would we like to be praised on, or do we think we should get praise on? And I have to say, I think Ofsted is incredibly fair. and you can talk to them now, which you couldn't have talked to them years ago. And the Ofsted report that you've alluded to earlier, I think you're spot on. So I think Ofsted now have got to a stage where, to a better degree, Ofsted, they've got to the stage now where Ofsted, I think, there's obviously the case Ronnie referred to is really sad. In general, I think Ofsted now are getting it right. So, I think, there's always going to be the odd bad one, but, I'll come to Beth today, but I think, when you talk about EHCPs have been mentioned an awful lot. One of my questions actually is on EHCPs, but they do take a long time to put in place. I sat on the panel a few times and watched all the feed in from so many people to an EHCP. The meetings are a long meeting, lots to discuss, lots of data, lots of information. To gather that, it takes time. But it isn't about the decision, it's about the process for the child. Getting the support in place as soon as a plan is a plan, but it's getting the support in place quickly, and regarding, value for money on the SEND money, for those of us that are governors, we have a tedious task every year of completing the SVFS, the school's value financial statement. I do that for my school because I love doing it. And one of the questions is around value for money. As governors, do we know, and actually ask me, sorry, do we know how much money Broadley has got in the pot for SEN? And I do know, because as governors, we should be, and I encourage all councillors to be governors, because we should know what our SEND pot is. Is it going to be spent in the right direction? And so the SVFS does put out that as a question. So, my first question actually is on 7.3, it gives the data for assessments and issuing of plans. I know that the 20 days, the term. Q2 this year stood out for me. The data on page 15, in Q2, there's 61 requests for assessment, 6 of which got issued. So it's the lowest number of referrals and the highest number of cases. So something happened in Q2 different than all the other, because the rest are all around sort of 40% of cases and around 100 and whatever. But Q2 stood out as not many referrals. And that's one question.
Shall I answer that?
Yeah, if you want to, yeah.
So basically Q2 covers the school summer holidays. So requests coming in, which could be from schools or could be from families, tends to go down over the summer holidays.
Okay.
The other thing is that there's the timing, there's a mismatch in the timing, because what happens is a request comes in, the strategy usually is to issue the plan within 20 weeks.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be a lag.
Right.
You
Okay.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not, you're issuing plans in one quarter that were actually requested, prior to that. So that's why.
The educational psychologist, I know is a concern, and I know we're doing what we can. Is it the wages we're offering? Is it the salary we're offering, or is it just the?
It's a national problem.
It
That's
is.
the
It's
national.
a national problem. There is a national shortage of education psychologists. We have recruited one, and I've had a very positive conversation this week with another, which is being followed up tomorrow. So I'm very confident about that, and a possible third. So we've got a team which consists of, if we recruit principal education psychologists and 4 education psychologists, if we can get 3 people in, that's a really good start. And we've got a separate campaign going out for the principal education psychologist in the spring, and I'm working with our marketing team, our comms team, around how we can really beef that up, and our HR team are really going to put all the stops out. The pay, we've moved over to the Salisbury scale, which is the national pay scale, and we have reviewed that for the new advert and the campaign that's going out for the principal education psychologist.
Wonderful. No, and my final question before I go to the last comment is under point 9, you mentioned those 9 SLAs that we had in Hampshire, and in paragraphs 10 to 15 it details what we're doing about all of them apart from one. I couldn't see any mention of governor services. I can see all the others all the others on the list of all the 9. 8 were covered in the following paragraphs. Governor services, obviously I'm passionate about governors because I know all schools struggle to recruit decent governors. Some take people on for the sake of it, but you need governors with the skill set you need in a school. My school is running on a very small governing body at the moment, but we've got the skill set across all of us, cover everything we need. Just recruited 2 more, which is great. But it's real hard to get numbers, but equally the quality of governors that you need to drive the school forward. So governor services piece, and I know that Hiscock is retiring this year. She is Mrs. Governor Services on the island. So the governor services element, I'd like a bit of clarification on really.
Has gone out with a new SLA offer to all of the schools, and we're working very closely with the National Governance Association. We're bringing that back in-house. That's part of a separate contract that we've always had with Hampshire around some of the training aspects, but we can get that delivered via the National Governance Association. And then we're looking at how we replace Di and actually how we can bring that back in potentially with the clerking service too, because that's an area where we know there are concerns from some governing bodies. So that's part of the package that Beth and I are working on at the moment. And there are 2 other smaller SLAs that we're keeping on, but just for 6 months while we establish the school improvement service. And really, that's why it's great that Beth can start now, so that we can start handing over the bits that we haven't got the capacity for at the moment until the summer term. And at the end of the summer term, they completely finish.
My final comment is obviously when there was always this Hampshire getting rid of, and then the local learning partners have been taken out of schools. Well, I've got a few got a few good friends of mine and head teachers that I met over the last few years. A lot of the comments were, we're really worried about school improvement team and driving forward the NLP relationships that they were losing. Positive comments about our new service manager of education coming on board, because it's great to have a head teacher that's done it coming and joining the team. So Moodley, I'd like Beth just to give an initial thoughts and just your initial thoughts. I know when you're full-time, initial thoughts on how you see this.
Yeah, I've already started. So I've actually met with all of the head teachers in groups to get their feedback, because it's really important. This is a partnership, and it's not done to them, it's done with them, because now's their time to hold their voice. So I've listened to them all talk about what they see, what school improvement for them, what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and how they see it moving forward. So I've already done that piece of work with them with the feedback. It's aligned in terms of actually the school improvement offer that we want to provide to the island is bespoke for the island, for Isle of Wight children. Before it was overlaid in terms of, it wasn't necessarily where our starting point was. So actually the offer that will be put out to schools sort of in the next couple of weeks, actually, with all of the feedback from the head teachers, will mean that we will be able to find a school improvement service that is personal, that is flexible, and that aligns to what each school's priorities are, rather than it being grouped the whole together. So we've done a lot of work already with the head teachers, but a lot of listening work, which I think has been really important. And yeah, of course, there's that anxiety as they've had the Hampshire learning partner, all these different acronyms, isn't it? But of course, that there has to be an element of that building up of trust, credibility, and mutual respect, and that does take time. But actually, we've already begun that process of working with the head teachers.
I was putting you on the spot. I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that.
I'm more than happy to.
That was the concern from head teachers, that change of the top end. Fine, it's the day-to-day NLPs that they saw in the schools. That was a relationship they were really not nervous about losing or changing, shall we say.
I think the only other comment I would make is some heads have reported to us that they had a number of changes in a very short period of time, and so they're looking to us for stability now. So I think having 2 serving head teachers coming to join the team, I think that's a really great message to send to the island, and actually to give stability, because Beth and Sam are both known and well respected, and that's really important for our new team.
Yeah, that's gone down very well. Okay, let's end you may have the last question to the next two councillor Churchman.
Really it's about school governors on the Highlands. I think we have 7 out of 10. It never seems to vary. The onus on anybody joining as a school governor now is pretty horrendous. I've been a school governor for a very long time, and I feel we've on 3 occasions had people come to us, and after not a couple of months, but within a short space of time, they've left. Because when you look at the governor training programme, what is it? It's something like 16 or more modules for this, that and the other. I really think we're getting to the stage where people just are not prepared to commit the time. In the old days, the school governor was somebody who went there maybe once, twice a term, looked to see what the head teacher was doing. How's the school doing? Fine. But now it's gone so far beyond that people just are not prepared to commit to the amount of time and work involved. And that worries me. It really does. I don't know. Has anybody got any suggestions?
The interesting comment is we took on 2 governors before Christmas, and they were both absolutely bamboozled by the clerk with this, and this, and they both left.
Yeah.
You know, the clerk made it sound, yeah. And so what we have done now, we've taken it away from the clerk. We've devised a governing body checklist. Involves getting access to the Governor Hub system first and DBS checks, and phasing the training in. And our latest governor has said, would it great to have a checklist to work through to get them on board properly. You can rather chuck it all at them in one go. If you learn from, you can't afford to lose these people.
We're aware, and we've got a programme in place that we're going to put in for governors. Obviously, Governor Forum has already started to change, and we're looking at how we can really, maximise that. And that's actually part of our new offer. Governance is going to be quite crucial in that. We see governance as really important in terms of helping support change across the island. And also, you're the biggest volunteer army in the country, so we'd be foolish not to use the expertise. Yeah.
With our demographics, we really should
We'd
have.
happily share our checklist if you wanted it, but it's worked for us on the new one.
Yeah,
Get
good.
it-
So
Okay.
you're taking that on board. Thank you.
I think thank you for all your input to this. It's been, I know it's a detailed report, but it's good to know that things are going in a really good direction, and thank you for all you're doing. So we'll move on to item 7, special educational needs and disability transformation.
So this is actually not a report, it's just an update. And the reason for that is that I'm in the process of updating the area send DEF, which is a self-evaluation, and the area send plan. So I wanted to give an update of where we're at the moment, and how we put the various strands together. So you're aware that we're in a safety valve agreement, and we put the last quarterly report in there. We have to provide the DFE with the quarterly report and an update on how we're doing. You're also probably aware that the current government have actually paused on the safety valve, and we actually have no more news around what they're going to do around that. Obviously, all of our submissions so far have allowed us to gain the money from the government to help us with our high needs spend, but we're not unsure as to what the future holds for safety valve. So what we've done is that we had the local government association, and they came back with a number of recommendations. So what we've done is look at what the safety valve did for us, which was actually put a lens on SEND and actually help us focus our plans initially when we started. And then we've moved forward with additional resources for schools, such as the primary behaviour service, the phone line, the online resources. And obviously we're uploading all of our documentation and minutes onto the council website, so we're being really open and transparent about that. And what we're in the process of doing is pulling all that together, pulling the actions of the LGA with a co-constructed plan and self-evaluation. It's not just about the local authority, it's about local partners too, because as Ashley has said, the IBC has got a huge part to play in that. So if you turn to the page, which looks like a Trivial Pursuit in the 80s, it basically is on a page the actions from the safety valve and the actions from the LGA, and we've put them into 6 overarching areas, which is what we're going to focus on. So the first one's around the co-production of children and young people and their families, and that's really important. We need to listen to our families. We know that the SEND system at the moment is frustrating for families across the country. We do get high levels of correspondence from families who struggle to navigate the system. So we need to listen to them about what we can do to make the system better for them, and ultimately what children experience in the classrooms and in school. So that's our first main work stream. The second one is around early intervention and prevention. So getting services into school and nurseries at an earlier point and helping families at a much earlier stage. And that's really about what we offer and how we do it, working with partners, not just ourselves, but other partners too. So, health visitors, maternity services, school nursing, all the other services that are involved in that. We move into the local offer and our provision around services for schools and for other settings. So that's really about how we have a variety of different services that can support families and children, not just the local authority, but the IBC, public health, and the voluntary sector, to ensure that we actually have a really robust offer. And one of the things we want to do is have a really clear front door so that people know how to access those services. At the moment, it's various different branches and it's not clear for parents, and we know that. So that's part of making sure our local offer is really up to date, and actually we have the right places for children. So you'll be aware that since we came into position, we've created 55 additional places already for special educational needs, and that's at the St George's Satellite provision, Medina House and Greenhaven. And we're going to look at the next stage for us is looking at our resource provisions across the island, harmonising numbers, which will increase provision there and create more places for children, which are desperately needed. And then we move on to the next phase within our wheel there, the statutory processes. So working with our team on the training they get, making sure that we are hitting the timeliness there, has an impact in terms of the education psychology service. And as Ashley said, we have locums at the moment, clearing our backlog to work on that so that we can stick within the windows that were set down in the code of practice, and that actually will increase confidence in the system there. So we know that that's an area where we still need a lot of work to do, but we're confident around the plans that we have in place around that. The next segment that's really important to us is that preparation for adulthood. So that's really around how we help children and young people progress into pathways into adulthood that enable them to be successful in life. We've appointed a post-16 lead, as I've reported in there, Julie Lambert, who works underneath with Beth. And actually that's going to be a key part of actually creating the pathways for young people, helping them with independent living, ensuring that they get the health support they need, and then that community inclusion, because that's vital. Otherwise, if children and young people don't feel part of the society as they progress into it, we then see it coming out in other areas. And then obviously looking at our joint commissioning, and we know we've got a lot of work to do on joint commissioning too, in terms of how we commission places, who pays for what, how the different things are aligned. At the moment, we need to do, we are working very closely with our IBC colleagues around that in terms of therapy provision, and we need to work on how we do commissioning and do smart commissioning and keep those contract management at the forefront of what we're doing. And then on the other page for that is really just the governance of special educational needs across the Isle of Wight, and that's just there so you can see that we have the governance model in place and we have those 6 work streams, and then from those 6 work streams they will report into Ashley and his counterpart in the area SEND board. So I just wanted to give you an update around that because it is a work in progress, but it's really important that you're aware that it is, with everything else going on still, we're not stopping, we're not actually, you know, putting something to one side, we're actually continuing that plan. And once we have the plan and the self-evaluation, I'm happy to bring them back and share them with you. Obviously they're with other partners as well. We're going to have them ready for next week to share with our other colleagues to make sure that they have their input to them too.
This in the test. Does everyone know what the safety valve agreement is?
Did read it and I can't remember.
Basically, we went into the safety valve agreement when we were in the partnership with Hampshire. So local across the country, SEND spend is really high, and because of that, it means that our high need spend is overspent. So the government had 2 programs, the safety valve and delivering better values program, and lots of local authorities were invited to be part of those 2 programs. The Isle of Wight was invited to be part of the safety valve, and as part of that, we were given some money up front to develop some resource to support the system, in exchange for us agreeing that we'd have to look at how we can get to a zero-based budget by the end of the agreement. And what the government did was give us cash injections to help our high needs overspend. So that enabled us to set up the PBS service, the primary behaviour service. It enabled us to set up the phone line and other resources for schools, and we didn't have to put any money in, it came to us.
Yeah.
Councillor
You
Lewis,
did read it.
you may.
Following off that, because I thought I understood the safety agreement, but when I had a couple of parents ask me about it, and I wasn't able to explain it very well to them because from what they understood of it, it looked like we were having to save money to get money, and I couldn't explain that well to them. Are you able
So we have to get to a zero-based budget we're getting the money that pays off our debt, our deficit, as long as we can get to a zero-based budget at the end of the agreement. Currently our high needs block spend is ring fenced, so it doesn't sit on the council's balance sheets, and that's nationally, it's a ring fence thing. That comes to an end in a couple of years. So we have to ensure that the system is fit for purpose. We haven't made any cuts to provision. We've actually increased provision, we've increased places. One of the parts of the safety valve agreement is out of our hands, but was that we had a free school bid as part of that. We haven't had any more details on that from the Department for Education. That was a 75 place SEMH for secondary age pupils. Because we haven't had any input on that, because it's out of our hands, we created a St George's satellite, and that has enabled us to put an SEMH provision on the island, which we never had before. So there is a lot of a lot of councils up and down the country are overspent on their high needs block. Yes, we have to get to a zero-based position by the end of it, but at the moment, if we can carry on with some of our plans around increasing provision, ensuring there is the right provision for children, and that that we have early intervention, hopefully we will get to a place where we can meet the DfE at some point. We are in negotiation with them constantly, but we're not on track at the moment. We are off track.
Thank you.
I think that's a really important point. So basically, the agreement was being negotiated between the council and the DfE back in 2022. And essentially what the financial forecast was saying then was that the overspend in the high needs block would get out, the overspend in the dedicated schools grant would get up to about £13 million, because the council was spending more to deliver its statutory duties than it was receiving in income from the DfE. And what's happened very quickly is that that forecast started to look like an underestimate of it. So because we meet the DfE, on a very regular basis, like 4 times a year, I think it is now, we keep them up to date on it. But you'll see in one of the appendices that's published is actually the report that went to the DfE from last November, and it shows that we are very significantly off track. Now, I think the key point for members to understand, this committee to understand, is that what the Department for Education expect us to be able to do is to explain everything that we're doing, and to show that there is nothing else that people can think of that we're not doing to minimise spend. And actually, that's exactly what's happening around the country, because there's 39, I think it is, or 38 local authorities in the safety valve agreement. And a very significant proportion of them are not on track. There are some cases where the DfE has stopped making the payments. It's all published, actually. If you just Google Isle of Wight Safety Valve Agreement, you can read. I'm looking at it now, I just Googled it. You can see the profile that was set out in 2022, but in common with most local authorities around the country, they're not on track. And the reason they're not on track is that the number of education and healthcare plans nationally is going up 10% a year. And the income is not going up 10% a year. Yeah. And actually you've got inflation in the system as well. So the cost of providing services is going up, significantly as well. So the gap is just getting bigger and bigger. And I think the new government recognises this is not going to solve the challenges around SEND nationally. We need to do something different. So they've kind of paused it. We carry on meeting. So far they've paid us all the money for this year, for example, even though we're not on track. And my expectation would be that as long as we're evidencing to them that we're doing everything we can to meet it. And one last thing on it is what's really important about the safety valve agreement for people to think about is that the highest quality system is also the lowest cost system. Because if you identify needs early, that's the best quality, it's the best thing for children, and actually it costs less. So when the Local Government Association came in and did their peer challenge, one of the things they said was some health services are only available with an education and healthcare plan. So why, NHS, don't you provide those services without an education and healthcare plan? Because all you're doing is fueling the statutory process so that if you're over 5, you can get speech and language therapy. Well, why not just give them speech and language therapy? And that's what the Local Government Association said. And that's why the plan that Naomi has articulated is a multi-agency plan, jointly led not just by the council, but also by the Integrated Care Board.
Previously, our safety valve plan was just us. And actually, it can't just be us. It has to be everyone. And that's why I wanted to give an update, because it is about all of our partners.
Chair.
Are there any quick questions for Naomi on this paper? Yeah, go on.
Obviously, you said it's going up 10%. Is it because we are better at diagnosing children, or is it lifestyle? Is it smartphones? Is it bad parenting? Because as you said, prevention is better than cure. So we need to get to the source of why have we got this increase of 10%? I mean, I'm not saying have you thought about it, but has anybody sort of started to work out? I mean, is it smartphones and everything else?
It's a
You
national
know,
question that
you
people
tell
ask,
me.
but we are much better at diagnosing now. And also, we have, so when the code of practice changed, it changed up to the age of 25. Previously, it wasn't up to the age of 25. So actually what happened is we have a lot of local authorities found they got into a bit of a pickle, because suddenly we had up to 25 years of age where we had to provide provision for, which we didn't do previously. So there's a lot of going back and having to deal with legacy issues, but we are much better at diagnosing now. And actually, a lot of the people who have masked in the past or not been diagnosed now are. So, for example, I got diagnosed with dyslexia much later on in life. I just couldn't understand why. It just looked strange to me. But actually, once you get that diagnosis, you know, actually you can put tools in place to support you, and we're much better at doing that.
Yeah. Well, I would have thought the diagnosis is far better, but are we in fact going overboard with the diagnosis? Kids survived. You know, I'm not saying we shouldn't help children with any form of difficulty, but are we concentrating far too much on what I would call minor problems? I have a totally dyslexic son, 44, still can't read or write. He never will. So I've been through all this, but why, you know, have we broadened the spectrum to such a degree that every child born now has got a disability or a deficiency?
So I think it's multifaceted. I think there is something around diagnosis. I mean, everyone's probably got a view on this. I mean, there are things going on across the country. I'm talking about across the country.
Yeah.
So, for example, there are children who are thankfully surviving, you know, and living to a longer age who were not surviving before. And so they're in so advances in medical, medical advances means that there are children now who are alive who would not have been alive 20 years ago. And so they often need some support. There's also a lot of research that's been done about the impact of the reduction in early intervention services, and how, so for example, the reduction in family centres, things like this, where needs would have been identified quicker if a parent took their child to a children's centre, they would have got early intervention because there was more support available. And the lack of that means that there has now been escalation of need, which is then being picked up in school. So it's lots of things. It's, as Naomi said, it's around diagnosis, it's about the increased age range, and I think it's about all those other things as well.
Yeah.
I think
complicated.
I think we'll move on to school attainment, looking at time. So I'd like to move on to item 8 on the agenda, the school attainment.
Thank you for that.
Which
The report. So I'll just do a summary and open up to questions, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So
please do.
we have, as you know, we had an SLA agreement with Hampshire. So this is validated data that came in from the summer results. So August, from June to August 24. And you know, as you won't be surprised, our earliest data is above national, but all other measures we are below national. And we've talked about this before, about actually we've got a lot of work to do around that. We have some inconsistencies in our data, and data fluctuates in different areas. So there are lots of things that we need to do in terms of improving the quality of education across the island. We know that some of this is down to some of the pathways that young people are on, so that you see and you know that when we get to sort of A-level provision, our children achieving at the top grades is very poor, and actually you know, we are one of the worst performing authorities for top grades. The local authority interactive tool places us at the bottom of most measures, and that's why having better in the school is crucial. So what I prefer to do is just outline some of the approaches we're going to do for school improvement, and then hand over to you for any questions, because I think the report details in quite a lot of detail around the different areas across the different measures in terms of our performance. So as Beth has alluded to, one of the things we want to do is actually have a really comprehensive offer and really live our education strategy out from that cradle to career approach. And what we've got to stop doing is doing the episodic approach. We need to think, how does that child transition across and through the system, so that we know that what they're doing in early years work through to year 1 and year 2, and then what we're doing in primary years 5 and 6 transitions into secondary 7 and 8, so that there are those seamless transitions, and teachers understand what is being taught in the younger year groups and what's expected in the older ones too. And I think it's part of a really comprehensive package. You'll be aware that we've recruited a maths and English advisor. Our approach is slightly different to the way that Hampshire delivered school improvement on the island. We're focusing on teaching and learning, because if we get teaching and learning right, that's what we're there for. We're there to teach the young people and the children. If we can get teaching right and focus on teaching within the classroom rather than going in and inspecting, we feel that that's a better approach and we'll have better outcomes in terms of the impact of our work. So we've got a lot to do. The team comes into place in April, and for the summer term, Beth's got a really robust induction programme, and we've got a number of training that the Isle of Wight Council and Sarah Teague's team have been brilliant in setting up for us, a variety of different external parties helping us, making sure that we are the very best in terms of our school improvement offer, so that when we get to September, we can really hit the ground running with the support. So we will be supporting schools in the summer term and from now onwards, but actually from now until the team start, Beth is getting into the schools and getting to know all the head teachers and understanding and listening. And then we've got the next phase, which is around embedding and getting people out into the schools and understanding what the needs of the schools are. For example, what are their mathematics needs? What are their reading and writing needs? And then starting the real work from September onwards.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Downer.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Sorry. It starts from the early years, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
The building blocks of life and being able to look after themselves. Now, year 1, take this. They focus too much on all children being equally attainment. They're not, because they all develop at different stages. And I don't think that the government, or well, any government I've seen, minister I've seen, don't even know their times tables. The thing is that no allowances, I don't think any allowances, I'm only a layman, you know that. The thing is that they, where they develop at different stages, but they're expected to do all the same, you know, what allowances is made for that? Also, going through to senior school and that, there's too much focus on academia and, you know, putting people through university. They're not all academic sureguards now, are they? And the other thing is that vocational and people that working with their hands, how much is that encouraged? Because you're still going to need plumbers, carpenters and all this and that, not right in the academic route. I know that sounds a bit mad, but
no, it's a really
thank you, Chair.
It's a
That's
really
fine, Councillor Downer.
It's a really good point, Councillor Downer. And actually, in our education strategy, we were really careful not to talk about too much of the academics, not because they're not important, but actually children need different pathways, and vocational pathways are absolutely needed. Have any of you tried to phone up for a plumber or an electrician recently? It's not easy getting one, is it? No. And actually, it's really important. We need to make sure that there are the right pathways for young people to go on to, and that they're different. And that we have high aspirations for all children, and we constantly go back and make sure we revisit. One of the core things that we absolutely must do is make sure children can read and write. Isn't it? We've got to have really high standards around that, and that has to be a non-negotiable for the island, because otherwise, if we say, oh, it's okay that people can't, actually we're not helping young people on the island, are we? They're not able to progress on to the next bit. And you know, we're very clear, but by focusing on good quality, high quality teaching in the classroom, you know, ensuring that young people get a really rich, great experience, we can work towards that, you know, achieving what we have set out.
I was just going to say, you know, obviously high quality teaching and learning isn't everybody does all the same thing all the same time. high quality teaching learning is about those adaptations, but for children from the relative to their starting points, 30 children, you know, will all have the same thing at the same time. But it's being aspirational for all of those children so that they can make that progress.
I wouldn't say it was it's very hard for young people now. You know, years ago when we was at secondary school, it was a bit like an approved school, but we got through it all right. But life was simple then. It's so complicated now, it's unbelievable. You know, perhaps I'm just simple. Life was simple then. You could leave school, you could just go out and get a job. If you didn't have that one, you went and got another one. You know, so, and the other thing I'd just like to ask very quickly, Chairman,
please do.
thank you. Domestic science, is that taught in schools? Because, you know, and also adding up their pay packet and all that sort of stuff. You know, domestic science, doing a tatey, cooking a meal, how to look after themselves. Is that being taught?
So food technology is compulsory up to Key Stage 3, and actually it's a really important subject across our schools, and we see some really good practice with, you know, with those sort of skills in terms of the practical subjects. Now it varies because as we don't dictate what curriculums schools have and deliver. There is the national curriculum, but that's the basics. Actually, what, you know, what they do above and beyond the national curriculum is up to the schools, but all, you know, all children should have access to food technology, as we now call it. In some subjects, in some schools, they will do textiles, which is your sewing, as you might refer to it. But actually, those subjects are really important in school. Design technology is it was my subject, actually. It's what I used to teach, and it's important.
Interesting that last point, of course. On the Isle of Wight, we still have some primary schools that operate in old middle school sites. The old middle school sites do have kitchens and food technology facilities, whereas the new purpose-built primary schools, which is square boxes joined together, do not have those type of facilities. So, you know, some schools, primary schools, can offer that type of thing in the old middle school sites. But Councillor Henry was next.
It's great that we have a new team set up, but realistically, it probably won't have a huge impact on the results, which we're going to get examined in July, May, June time. Do we know if any of the other schemes we've run in the past, such as the Year 6 project or the big push on attendance, have made any difference at all? Are there similar things would be looked to run in the future?
Yeah, we've got a whole set of a suite of offers that we want to go out to schools with, and we haven't sent them out just yet. We're just finalising the last few bits and pieces and setting up a website for them to go on to. This year is a very challenging year for the education system, and I've said this before in other meetings. We can't underestimate the impact that place planning is having on all schools. You know, it's not a great time, and I don't envisage the results will be any better this summer. That's not an excuse. I'm not saying that that's acceptable, but what I'm saying is we need to start somewhere, and actually we can't. If we run in and do things quickly, we're gonna get it wrong. And actually, what we need to do is get it right to start off with, and look at the long game. And actually, that's why our education strategy is to 2030. We've made great strides already, but the other side of it is in school improvement, you can throw lots of different initiatives at schools, and heads become quite overwhelmed, as do their staff. Even if you have a basic school improvement package, you could have an English advisor going in, a maths advisor, you can have an early years advisor, plus you have your LLP, because we all know that term. They could all say 3 actions. You know, that's a whole set of actions then that someone's got to manage and take control of and ensure they're having impact. So we need to make sure that the work we're doing is really focused and is really high quality. And in terms of the project offer, absolutely. Beth's got some exceptional contacts that you know, we're going to be working with, and we're really looking forward to sharing that offer with our schools, because we think that we've got something that's actually really bespoke for the island and really geared up to work alongside and live out our education strategy.
So the only other thing, when we look at the data for the whole island, it's not great, but there are exceptions. Some schools are doing it, and we need to celebrate those schools.
Yeah, and that's what we do need to celebrate too. There are real pockets of excellence across the island. Unfortunately, when you look at the island as a whole, that brings everything down, doesn't it?
The opportunity of it being myself and the other school improvement, actually we can coordinate that excellence. So rather than there being 5, 6 different people, you know, as before schools had from Hampshire coming in, actually that we can actually see across the board. So we can actually hold that excellence up high and make sure it's crossed across island schools.
So you see more of the skills, but some schools being sort of not sort of share with other schools.
Absolutely, and my role will be to find those pockets of excellence and actually share them and bring island schools together for best practice.
Councillor Spink and then Councillor Lever. Councillor
Thank
Spink.
you. Thank you, Chair. Two very quick questions, if I may. It's page 101 at 7.4. I just wanted to comment that it's I think it's very credited to disadvantaged people have outperformed against disadvantaged national standards. I mean, I think that's something worth highlighting. It's not really a question, but I was very pleased to read that. My other question is rather more simple and probably reflects on me, but could someone translate paragraph 7.3 for me? I don't understand it very much. So physical development was slightly below national standards at 84.1%, suggesting a need to reinforce fine and gross motor skills through more structured activities. Sounds like an apprenticeship for a car mechanic, but someone could suggest, I don't really understand a lot of those terms, so I'd be grateful for an explanation.
To early years, and due to our children that are now in early years over the COVID time, they weren't out, they weren't in countries, they weren't climbing, they weren't doing all that physical exercise, so they were at home. Majority of them were at home. They weren't getting all of that development that they needed in terms of physical development, and now they're in our schools. So there's been a decline in physical, and that's what we're prioritising in our early years to ensure that children are now doing all those things that they've missed, because obviously those things affect writing, they affect being able just to sit. Your core muscles aren't developed if you're not hanging from something. So
sorry, how do you assess physical development?
So there is an early years.
Sit up straight now.
We're all being. So there is an early years framework that all early years teachers, so from 0 to 5, that they work towards, and then as part of that, the teacher will then make an assessment at the end to say that they think that this child has met the expected level, or actually the child hasn't met the expected level for whatever reason. It might be that the child, in terms of those fine motor skills, haven't quite mastered those, or in terms of, it might be that they can't actually sit still for a period of time, and actually they really struggle with that. So there's a list, not a list, there is a curriculum that they follow, which they can then.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. And it's I didn't even realise that schools look into account physical development. So I think that
gets children ready for writing.
Especially in sort of deprived areas, where poverty and diet and things might not be very good. Yeah, no, I think that's excellent. Thank you.
I see no more hands up. Oh, Councillor Lever, sorry, I didn't see you there.
Sorry,
Just the setup. I can't see everyone.
just to follow on about 7.4, again, just to echo what Councillor Spink was saying about really positive here that our disadvantaged pupils are outperforming sort of national standards. We don't want to mention that the gap between the disadvantaged and non-disadvantaged still remains, and it talks about targeted support. Do we just offer some examples about what that targeted support might look like?
So when the earliest children are moving into year 1, it's really important that transition from early years to year 1 is suitable for those children, and actually they may not be ready to go into a formal classroom, so schools will make a choice whether to continue that continuous provision for those children, so they continue that early years need even into year 1, so they are more ready for year 1 curriculum. I think there is an element that myself and Teresa as early as are going to be working on in terms of those transitions to early years to year 1, in terms of those disadvantaged children, the summer break, going from early years to year 1 and making sure that they don't fall back, and that the good practice from early years flows through. So their phonics, we need to make sure that we're closing that gap on their phonics into year 1, so that they're getting targeted daily support from high quality to trained staff. It's about us following up with schools in terms of their transition package, particularly between early years to year 1, to make sure that that gap begins to close.
And again, we've got some really, really good pockets of real success in year one as well. So we can draw upon that when we're looking at that as a whole island. Some really good going on.
Councillor Hendry.
Very quickly, we're talking about disadvantaged children, they're doing well. Is that because we may have some of our better schools in disadvantaged areas? And that's why we're getting better results, we have better schools there?
The patterns are really interesting on the island because they're spiky because of the number of schools. So it's really difficult. There aren't any trends over time when it comes to our data.
Yeah, Councillor Church, I'm sorry.
Right.
Yes.
I've always been interested in sport all my life. I've read reports whereby younger primary school children are doing so little of walking, running or anything that they actually don't develop their heart or their lungs to the full capacity. Long term, that means they're going to end up in hospital or dying early. I've got something here meaning to give to you for ages. In Scotland, it was to do with our famous tennis player. They do a daily mile every morning. You've heard of this.
Do that here.
Do it here.
Because it really worries me when they come to Haylands, they come by car. So not many children walk. And I keep thinking to myself, and as a country, I think we have the highest rate of child obesity in Europe. I'm not sure those figures are correct, but certainly, as I said, and we're talking about primary schools. We're not talking about the secondary schools. And it's such a dangerous thing long term. Anyway, I'll give you this afterwards and just to look at it. But do we do anything in particular?
We do a lot, I think, in terms of primary. Just one example is the peach games.
Oh, yes. Well, yeah, I was one of the instigators of that after the Island Games on the island in 2011.
All the schools participate in that. All schools have sports day. All schools have PE sessions every week. In terms of the early years and, you know, stage one, they'll be doing the yeah. So there's a lot going on.
Good. Because the sports awards are at the Medina Theatre in March.
What's interesting about that, I'll give you an example. Gatton Lake School is in a housing estate. Cars just park illegally on grass verges and on yellow lines. It's causing me havoc. But the Isle of Wight Council agreed with the school a walk in the school plan. Car park at Winchester House, where all parents have a permit to park between 2 20-minute slots morning and afternoon to walk their children along the road over the railway bridge into the school. Parents don't do it. The school works hard putting it in the newsletters and promoting this safer work to school, healthier work in the school. The parents just don't do it. And it's, you know, they prefer dropping off in the car and parking where they shouldn't park. And it's a very interesting concept about this way walking to school, safe walking to school. And I think that's a down to safe walking to school, isn't it? If there's a safe route to walk to school, schools should be encouraging that safer walking to school plan. It's a piece of work that is a slow burner, isn't it?
Just to add one very quickly, at Christmas, Haylands Primary School had their carol service at St Saviour's. We walked 300 children from Haylands to St Saviour's for the service, and we walked them back again.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant.
The Holy Cross children, as Councillor Henry walk from East Cowes to the Catholic Church in West Cowes. They downhill across the floating bridge to the school and the Catholic school in East and Cowes, don't they?
And no footpath in place.
No footpath.
Yeah.
Final comment, Councillor Down again.
Well, only a very quick one.
Yeah,
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, and this might be controversial as well, what I'm going to say. I think that, you know, with society, what it's become is too much mollycoddling. And also, you've got to eat a peck of dirt before you die, and you've got to knock a bit of bark off your knee, haven't you?
Right. On that note, I think, well, thank you for the report. We need to formally note the report, don't we? Formally note we received the report? Yeah, okay. Item 9, childcare sufficiency assessment. Ms. Readers.
No, 4. You mean people? Yeah.
Absolutely. as it was Teresa's report. Yeah.
Okay, the purpose of the report is it's the sufficiency assessment, which is statutory duty. The authority is required to present to members annually. So every year I come here with this report to present to you. I won't go through all of it. It is a long report.
Yes.
It sets out at the beginning, it sets out the demographics of the island and how those demographics affect early years. So it talks about the shift of residents on the island. So over the age of 65, we are now 29%, whereas the rest of England, 18%. So we have an ageing population on the island. The residents age 0 to 5 has decreased by 6.3%, and actually there's been a 13% reduction in children at the age of 5. So we know this. Level of employment is decreasing. We have lots of seasonal jobs here. We have paid jobs here. Housing obviously affects the early years market. And as I said, the birth rate is decreasing. So it kind of sets out the picture of what it looks like on the island. I'm just going to go through some of the highlights of the report. So for early years on the island, we are 98% of our early year settings are good or outstanding. And we have a really good early years team on the island for all of our early year settings. So we have a quality team on the island where we have one early years advisory teacher, and then we have 2 early years advisors that go into settings, childminders. The work that they do with the settings, it might be that the owner or the manager of the setting has triggered support and would like some additional support, and we'll go in and support. Might be that they have had or Ofsted inspection, we'll go in and support. And we have got a really, really good relationship with the early years. So they're always picking up the phone, and we work really well with them. We also do safeguarding visits to our early year settings. So we do safeguarding visits to all of the settings and all of the childminders on the program. And we also do a safeguarding audit with all of our early years settings, which is received really well from our early years providers. And the safeguarding report feeds back into the safeguarding board, local authority safeguarding. Because of our safeguarding support, our early years Ofsted inspections, safeguarding is always seen as a priority, as a positive. I'm going to touch wood there to keep that going. We also have a early years SEND team where we have 1 early years SEND teacher, 2 early years SEND advisors, and 3 portage workers who also support in our early years settings and with our childminders. So when we're talking about that increased number of children in SEND, we have got that support that is going in to our early years children, which again is a real success. In terms of our market at the moment, the early years market compared to last year, there's been very little change in terms of the number of providers and the childminders that we have. Nationally, there is a problem with a decrease in the number of childminders, and we are seeing that on the island as well. So when I first came into post, we had over 60 childminders on the island, and now we have 28. So there is a decline in, and it is a national issue where people are making that choice not to become childminders. We do a lot of work with Job Centre, and we promote it a lot. We promote it on our website. We promote it when we're going out to providers, and we're trying to increase that number. For whatever reason, people do not want to become childminders. In terms of businesses, our businesses are fairly stable at the moment. We're not getting a lot of inquiries in regard to business plans or in regard to the number of children that they've got on their books. So at the moment it is fairly stable, and we haven't got any concerns with that. We have rolled out the new entitlements successfully. We have the next rollout will be September this year, where babies 0 to 9 months actually access 30 hours of childcare. So that will be the next section that we're rolling out come September. We have successfully rolled out the other stages. In here, we also, a real success, which I'm really proud of, is the HAF programme that we have on the island. So the HAF was managed by Hampshire Local Authority. When that partnership ended, it came to the Isle of Wight. And I have a very small team that work on the HAF programme. The HAF programme is the Holiday Activity Fund. So we work with providers and schools to put on activities during the term time, during the holidays, and as part of that they will receive a nutritious meal and they will have that physical activity during that time as well. And on the island it's a huge success. We have to submit an annual report for HAF, and through that we have the parent voice and the student voice is really strong, and they really value that on the island. So that's something I'm particularly proud of, and I've got an amazing team that works on that. In terms of priorities moving forward, I have a very small team that works on the wraparound programme, and the wraparound programme is about having childcare before school and after school from 8 o'clock in the morning and then up till 6 o'clock in the after school. We are currently rolling that out. It's been a bit of a slower process to roll that out, but we are looking from the summer term, moving that forward, that the goal is to have every school on the island to be able to offer that. It might not be till 6 because it depends on parental demand, but we're working with all schools to ensure that that offer is there. If a parent needs it, if they are at work, they can leave their child at school until 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening. So that's something that we're working on from the summer term onwards. I think that's it. I'm happy that it's a very big report. So I'm happy to take any questions.
98% good in Ofsted. You know. I thought you are working with the 2%, are you?
Yes.
Yeah, the church, will you make
Yeah.
me?
Why do you think there is a decrease in childminders?
In terms of what childminders are required to do,
I knew you were going to say this. Go on.
there is a lot. So they also follow the EYFS, they follow the earliest foundation stage curriculum, and they are expected to meet these standards. And they also receive Ofsted. They also have safeguarding visits. So lots of these childminders are working by themselves, and there's a huge amount of work that is expected. We have got some childminders on the island that now are working with assistants, which helps in terms of that workload and what that looks like. So that is something that we would encourage to help with that. There's a lot of expectation, and unfortunately, early years childcare is not paid well.
In your opinion, and it's in your opinion, have we gone overboard about this?
You know, we've got to keep children at the centre of this, and you know, we wouldn't want our children to go somewhere where they're not safe, or where, you know, they're not meeting a standard.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's fair comment.
That's the downer.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Just got to read something out, and this is pertinent to the hours.
Okay.
Preschools are already saying that the funding didn't cover costs before government increased the national insurance and wage costs for employers. Recruiting is already difficult in early years due to the qualification requirements and low wages. Preschools have already closed on the island during the last few years, with the government raising the hours from 15 to 30 hours in September, and the potential closure of the preschools attached to school closures. As you have a statutory duty to have enough places for all children from 9 months up to school age, you may have to put out tenders to ensure enough sufficiency. What business is going to tender when the funding does not cover costs? And I would also like to add that this is going to disenfranchise children, where they would have to travel to another school where the preschool provision has already been taken out, referring to Vauxhall. Thank you very much.
in terms of our current data, And as you are aware, which I do say whenever I come to these meetings, that actually data is only good on that day, and particularly for early years, because early years children don't all start in September like they do in schools. So a child could start tomorrow, a child, 5 children could start tomorrow, which affects the data, or a child could leave. So data is only as good as the day that we talk about it in terms of early years, because it's very different to school data. We have not had any parental inquiries from any parents who have early years children to the local authority that is saying that they cannot find an early years place, or that they're worried about finding an early years place in the future. So we've had no inquiries at all from parents up to this point. In regards to the data that we have, in terms of the number of children that are, as you've said at Vauxhall, is the question that you're particularly.
Yes, it is a specific question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We have got sufficient places for those children, and as I've said before, it is parental choice where children are sent. So we do have a lot of movement of parents who do not send their children to their local early years place. They do go other places, and they do travel.
But if they don't, and some of those parents haven't got sufficient funds to send those children to school, e.g. bus fares, those children are going to be disadvantaged at the start of school. They're not going to get the grounding.
I would say to any parent, early years parent that is struggling, or if we can support, if we had, I haven't had any emails, Councillor Downing. If I was to receive emails, I could then have a look to see, where are the concerns.
But can you keep me informed about it?
Yes, I know.
Thank you.
Richard,
Chairman.
do you think that primary schools have enough contact and relationship with their feeder preschools, or is it patchy across the island? Because I mean, I've come from a situation where our preschool's on the same site as the school, so relationship is tight, it's very tight. But I guess where the preschool's not on the site for primary, do you think there's some work to do with primary's perhaps be a bit more involved?
I think that's something we always work on. We always encourage. We have an early years head teacher briefing where we bring all the head teachers together, and we talk about early years, and we talk about, like you said, about those transitions and what that looks like. And I think there are pockets of, again, excellence where that relationship is really strong. And there are also some places where it's not quite so strong. I think there is room to improve, definitely. And that is something that the early years team would support. And
Easier on the same side, it's much easier.
we do have the majority of our early year settings are on a school site. There's a very few that are not on school sites.
The private providers, yeah.
Well, private providers are even on school sites.
Do you have any more questions on Teresa's very comprehensive report? Got off lightly. Thank you again. And I know it's an annual report,
Sure, I'm
read anyway, so thank you. Item 10, members' questions. And Councillor Spink already indicated he wants to raise a question. So, from Councillor Spink, would you like to raise your question first?
I would, please. It's really 2 questions that I'm not really expecting an answer to, but if it follows on really from the member of the public sitting behind me who asked a couple of questions. The first one is, I think committee probably knows that I don't really like it when we're not allowed to see things. And one of those things relates to the advice that we're told cabinet members have been given. It does seem to me quite extraordinary advice that the decision makers visit the schools about which they're making a decision. That seems to me to be analogous to buying a car without actually popping round the corner to see it. So it does seem to me that that's a dubious advice. And I wondered, Chair, if you thought it appropriate if you would alert corporate scrutiny so that corporate scrutiny could make representations in time for its meeting, that they would like, if it's necessary, for example, to sanitize, as it were, the advice. So rather than it being the specific advice for individuals, if the monitoring officer were able perhaps to write down the principles, because I have some doubt, quite frankly, as to whether or not the principles on which someone is advised not to go to a meeting, or at least not to go to a school that is going to be the subject of a meeting, whether that's really, I mean, or whether that's really defensible in law. I mean, all confidential, so-called confidentiality is subject to a public interest, a legitimate public interest. And I would have thought in this situation regarding school closure, the public interest is overwhelming to know what the decision makers are being advised. So that's my first question. I'm not expecting you, apart from perhaps saying that you think it's right, that you should write to or contact the chair of corporate scrutiny and alert them to this, so that they don't simply, they're not simply presented with it as a fait accompli on at their meeting.
My answer to that, I will answer the question. Yeah, because this isn't political. I'm not going to be, I will mention this to the chair of corporate scrutiny.
Thanks.
To say the rate, but as was said earlier, both Councillor Bacon and Ashley said they look into whether the advice that was given could be shared with. And I know, yes, the detail is your forte, and and if that evidence can be shared with you, then we'll make sure that it's shared with you. It can't be shared with the public, I don't think, because it's an advice from our monitoring officer to our councillors. But if it can be shared with you, and I will make the chair of corporate scrutiny aware that this issue was raised at our committee before her meeting next week. Yes.
The other question I had, which although I don't necessarily expect an answer to, is this: is that it is concerning, I think, that the diocese has written a before action letter. In my experience, it's quite unusual for a body such as the diocese to threaten legal proceedings. And I just wonder, it follows on again from members of the public's question, I just wonder what consideration is being given to this, because part of the problem is I think we all agree that there has to be some school closures. I think the question is, to some extent, whether or not we're closing the right schools. And I have to say, from a visit that I've made, I'm not going to say which school, but a visit that I made, it seems a travesty, in my view, to lose the physical buildings and grounds that has in what is quite a highly deprived area. And also, from what I could tell, it seems very sad to lose the atmosphere and the quality of the teaching staff. And I just wonder this, that if, for example, we can't discuss this or don't discuss this with the diocese, and it goes to a judicial review, I mean, there aren't going to be any winners from that. There's going to be no winners from that financially. And say, for example, the High Court determines that our procedures were wrong. I'm not saying they are, but say they decide that, and that reflects on we've closed the wrong schools. By the time the judicial review comes to fruition, we'll probably have closed them. So it's not something that we can recover from. And I do think, I know that closure is important, and I know that it's costing us money. But I just think there are other issues. And when the diocese issues a before action letter, for us effectively to say, well, we'll see you in court, is that really what a local authority should be doing? And I don't expect an answer.
I think, I'm happy to answer from my perspective as the chair of this committee, and officers can, I'm not going to comment on my view on the diocese.
No, I wasn't either.
I have seen, as I think all members have seen, the copy of their pre-judicial review. Council legal team are dealing with it in the way they should do from a legal case. This committee discussed the process for the 3-hour meeting in November, and we were happy with the process has been followed. The correct dialogue with the diocese, as I said to Councillor Lilly's question earlier, the correct dialogue with the diocese is going on. The council is dealing with the legal case in the correct and proper way. I know officers have taken advice on the process from the DFE right through the process, as I did 6-7 years ago when we did the West White one. You know, regarding the choice of schools, under our constitution, as I said, I agree with you, schools have to close. We have a real problem on the island that hasn't been addressed for the last so many years, but we're not going there. So the choice of schools is the cabinet's under the constitution that we currently operate under. And therefore, you know, it is for cabinet to visit those schools or not. If the advice is there, if the advice is there and we can get you the advice they were given, that's fine. And whatever schools were chosen on the island will be in exactly the same position. You know, closing schools is not popular.
No, of course.
You know, I've been there, done that, got the T-shirts. It's not popular when you close a school, but you know, Councillor Bacon and his cabinet have to make tough decisions. It's not an envious position to be in, and I know Councillor Bacon would agree with that. So I've been there, but the choice of schools is down to cabinet, and procedure is being followed, and the diocese letter will be taken very seriously and has been dealt with by our legal team in a proper manner. Do you wish to add anything to that?
No, I don't think so. I think that's right. As you said there, we're in dialogue with the diocese about it, and we're responding according to the process.
Thank you.
Is there anything you wish to add? Or just
I'd have probably said what Ashley said.
Okay.
We've received a letter before action. It's being responded to in detail, as these things must be. Throughout this process, I have said that I'm confident in the procedure that's been followed. And I expect it will be reflected in the letter that is sent back.
from my perspective, you know, the diocese have been involved, as to Councillor Leahy's question, the diocese have been involved in the whole process. They may not think they've been involved, but they have been. They've been invited to all meetings and all they've put a response to all consultations.
Somebody who feels sad, that they're not sad.
And put to all consultation, you know, so it's been dealt with legally in a proper way. But in other words, the response has been given in time frames set by the.
It's just that if it's, come on, do it. It depends. I suppose the question is it appropriate in a case like this to let schools close until such time as the legal proceedings are determined? Because once the school is closed, it's irrecoverable. It can't be recovered. It's irrecoverable.
That is a question for next week's cabinet meeting, the legal advice, as opposed to for this committee.
That's fine. I'm just raising.
No, what I know is that the legal process of a letter being responded to by the council's legal team is happening. The outcome is obviously for the legal team to sort out.
Yeah. The only reason I raise it is that, as I say, I only visited one school. I was extremely impressed by that school, and I think that if it is closed, it would be a sad loss. And I also think, with respect, that there looks to me to be some, I'm not an expert on it, but some basis to the diocese claim. And it seems it would be a tragedy if the High Court ruled that the procedure was flawed and we'd already closed the school.
Councillor Bacon responded on as far as he said.
I think as we're in a legal process.
I think we need to end this debate here on the schools, but you know, in answer to your question, the council will follow and respond accordingly to the diocese's letter. Treat this as in the legal manner it should be dealt with. Do you have any more members' questions? Okay, and I thank everyone, and I hope that members of this committee do appear on the new committee structure, because the expertise we have, knowledge about education, would be sad lost if we all didn't sit or take part in the new committee decision making going forward. Final words, gentlemen, ladies.
No, just apart from to say thank you very much to the committee for all the support and scrutiny that you have provided us with since I've been here and over the years in the best interests of island children. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your chairmanship.
Meeting over. Thank you. The last time.